Well, thank you very much, Chair, and a very warm welcome to everyone from me. Let me start with a few words on the Safety, Environment and Sustainability Committee, SESCO, which I chair. The members have a very wide set of experiences in both executive and non-executive roles, in the oil and gas industry, in financial services, in engineering, in chemicals, in government, and public policy. And together, we use these perspectives to assist and advise the board in our three main areas: safety, environment, including climate change, and sustainability. And I'm delighted that Catherine Hughes has been nominated to succeed me as chair after the AGM in May. She has been a committee member for nearly 4 years, and she will bring deep expertise and commitment to the role. Every meeting of the board and of our committee starts with safety. That reflects its critical importance to the company. The board is pleased that 2020 was Shell's safest year ever, a year which had no fatalities at Shell-operated ventures. This performance demonstrates our enduring focus on safety, and that was also seen in the way the company rapidly responded to the exceptional demands of COVID-19 last year. Shell maintained its safety performance even as it established new types of virtual collaboration. We used remote audit techniques for our safety systems, and we applied innovative technology such as drones for our inspections. Shell has further enhanced its safety focus through the refreshed approach we launched in 2020. This new approach places more emphasis on the human dimension of safety performance, on making sure that we remain safe even when things don't go as we planned. It's an emphasis which we expect to bring long-term benefits to Shell. And indeed, it's this focus on the long term which is a real feature of the company's broader approach to sustainability. Now, sustainability is a large and multifaceted concept, but you can see it throughout the strategy of the company. It's part of the mindset of my committee, SESCO, and of course, it's part of the mindset of the board as a whole, and all the board committees contribute in their own ways. The board leads on overseeing Shell's culture and ethical standards, and with support from the audit committee, it ensures the financial sustainability, the financial resilience of the company. That task in 2020 brought some of the hardest decisions this board has faced. Another example of our broad-based approach to sustainability is in our nominations committee. This works particularly on diversity and inclusion and on maintaining the highest governance standards. Its work can be seen in the fact that, subject to the AGM next month, half the board will be female for the first time. Similarly, the Remuneration Committee ensures that the pay of senior management is rigorously assessed and linked to the company's strategy. With sustainability at the heart of that strategy, this work links executive pay to sustainable outcomes. Now, it's also worth pointing out that the board and its committees talk directly, albeit virtually, over the past year with its employees in various roles around the globe. Being inclusive and harnessing the diversity of Shell is, in the board's view, critical to achieving sustainability. And finally, on climate change, if operational safety is the foundation of sustainability, all of us on the board understand that Shell's reputation and our future business success depend on our ability to thrive through the energy transition. In SESCO, we've worked intensively with management on Shell's carbon targets, as we have on all aspects of Shell's environmental and social performance. And all these aspects of sustainability, everything I've mentioned today, are integrated into Shell's Powering Progress strategy. Indeed, developing Powering Progress, taking into account diverse views from many interested parties around the world, has been the preoccupying issue for the whole board over the past 18 months and more. Now, Ben introduced Powering Progress to you at Shell's Strategy Day in February. You're going to get much more detail today. So let me hand over to Ben now so that we can get started. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much to you, Nigel. So, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome. I think we have over 100 people on the online already. And so thank you to all of you for joining us today. So as Nigel says, just over 2 months ago, we set out our strategy for you. And that was a strategy to accelerate the transition of our business. We told you about how we are planning to transform Shell into a net zero emissions business and how we are going to do so purposefully, but also profitably. Now, this strategy, and we call the strategy Powering Progress, has 4 goals. And together, they captures actually Shell's role in society, what we do, what we should continue to do, and ultimately it is therefore also the case for Shell as an investment. Now, the 4 goals of Powering Progress are all critical for Shell's future, and they are founded on our core values of honesty and integrity and respect for people. And they're also secured through our determined focus on safety and our commitment to doing business in a transparent way. And therefore, together, the 4 goals weave sustainability throughout our business strategy. Now, at Strategy Day, we chose to focus on 2 of the goals, namely generating shareholder value and achieving net zero emissions. And we laid out how our approach to capital and the new structure of our business are in harmony with our target to be a net zero emissions energy business by 2050 in step with society. And today we will return to that net zero target because we know that this is a subject of great interest to all of you. And we know you still want to go deeper here. But we will also look at 2 other Powering Progress goals that we didn't spend much time on Strategy Day. And these are respecting nature and powering lives. Now, of course, Powering Progress, as I said, is founded upon our core values and on safety. So before I go further, let me touch on our HSSE performance. And as Nigel already mentioned, we are now using a new approach on safety with a more consistent focus on the way that people and culture and equipment and work systems and processes all interact. And that means that we take a close look at how we expect work will be carried out safely and what also happens in reality. Because people make mistakes all the time. Processes fail all the time. But in a new approach, we have designed it to allow us to make mistakes and still operate safely. And part of that is through creating a psychologically safe environment in which staff can speak up. Another part is building on a learner mindset, which will allow us to take lessons both from successes, but also from failures. You can take a look at our sustainability report and you will find a lot more details on what we mean by that approach. But our personal safety performance in 2020 offers already very encouraging signs that this approach has promise, because we had our safest year ever. The first ever year in our corporate history without a fatal injury. And now, today, it's over 600 days since anyone died during our operations. And at the same time, we also achieved the strongest ever process safety performance at Shell Operated Ventures last year. So these are hard-earned achievements. But at the same time, we also know they can be so easily undone. So we continue to have to work on further embedding our new approach on safety, and there's absolutely no reason to let our vigilance slip here. We also have much work to do on our net zero emissions target. We have a whole session on this in a moment, so I will be brief here. But let me say that our net zero emissions target supports the more ambitious goal of the UN Paris Agreement, the goal to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And I want to just emphasize one point here, which is very important, that our target is a comprehensive target. So it includes the emissions from the energy that we produce ourselves, of course, but it also includes the emissions from the oil and gas that others produce, but that we sell as energy products to our customers. Now, you have to bear in mind that altogether, we sell more than 3 times more oil and gas energy products than the oil and gas that we extract ourselves. So to account for the company's full effect, to be comprehensive, we include everything we sell in our targets, not just what we extract. And when it comes to the oil that we extract ourselves, the volume is coming down as well. So we believe that our total oil production has peaked in 2019, and we expect that oil production to gradually decline at 1 to 2% per year, including that divestments in there, all the way to 2030. And that's already a significant shift. But to make real progress, of course, we must change what we sell. We must sell a lower carbon energy mix. So we should sell more renewable electricity products or hydrogen or biofuels. Now, ultimately, the precise changes on how this product portfolio will unfold will, of course, very much depend on where we can find business value, as it is actually our customers themselves that are moving towards net zero. But whatever the pathway is, it's already fair to say that the changes that we must make to get to net zero will be very substantial, no matter what exact pathway we will find ourselves taking. Now, many of you are asking, can you actually do it? So you have asked us, is Shell set up for success? You have asked if we can keep the staff that we need to run our traditional businesses. You've asked, can we attract the staff that we need to build our low carbon future and do it profitably? And my answer to all these questions is yes. So are we set up for success? Yes. And we are restructuring the company to improve further. When our reorganization project appears in the media, it is often in the context of job cuts. And indeed, reducing cost is an important part of it. We have to be competitive, and therefore we have to be cost competitive. But it is actually so much more than just cost reduction. It is also about putting Shell into a structure which matches our strategy, that allows us to be bold, driving forward the change that must happen, and that makes us even more customer focused than we have ever been before. And all of this will maximize the advantages we already have, from our ability to innovate and bring new products to market, through our trading and optimization capabilities, to our global reach and our leading brand. Now, all of that, of course, depends on the talents and the performance of our people, and whether they are in the newer areas of our business, like power, or in the traditional businesses, all of them have a critical role to play, and all of them know this as well. So are we able to keep valuable staff? Yeah, I think we are. The culture of Shell is good. It's a strong culture. We live by our values of honesty and integrity and respect for people. And we do so because we know and believe and feel it's the right thing to do. They are the right values to live by. And those same values actually make our company a place where people want to work. And when you combine that with our purpose, which is to power progress by providing more and cleaner energy solutions, you have a place where people want to work and a mission they want to get behind. Our talented staff want to stay with Shell, and we can see that in our staff turnover figure of about 2.5% in 2020. We can see it in the very high scores that staff give us in internal surveys. You can see it in the way that graduates join, some of them perhaps with the intention of just staying for a year or two and pick up some essential skills, but then they will stay actually and build their careers in our company. So yes, I think we can keep the talent that we have. And if you ask, can we attract the talent that we need? My answer again is yes. The very scale of the challenge that we have set ourselves, its importance, its global impact, that gives me confidence that we can. The brightest minds have always been attracted to the biggest challenges, and there is no doubt that climate change is a significant challenge for the world. We are determined to help the world make the changes that it needs to make to tackle climate change. And in a large part, climate change is an energy challenge. And in part, the answer must come therefore from the energy industry and companies like Shell. So those people who want to be part of the solution, who want to drive through change, will continue to be attracted to work for a company like Shell. And I believe they will be able to see the same thing as me. That is that companies like Shell, with strong brands, wide global reaches, can make real change happen. Companies like Shell that can produce net zero industrial solutions that work for customers all over the world, whether they are in the United States, in India, or in Japan. That it's companies like Shell that have the reach and the financial muscle to make the difference. So if you ask me, can Shell do it? I say, yes, we can do it. And you can get a better idea of how we will do it. So please read our energy transition strategy that we published earlier today. Now, as I said on Strategy Day, we are publishing this particular strategy for you and for other shareholders to examine ahead of an advisory vote at the AGM. And we will update that strategy every 3 years. And each year, we will ask our shareholders for an advisory vote on the progress that we are making. And I hope if you have read the report, you will find it useful. And for those of you who have read it already this morning, of course, I'm very happy to answer any question that you may have on it in the next session that comes up on carbon. Now, of course, that energy transition strategy report fits very well with our approach on transparency that I talked about earlier. This is an area in which we are very proud of the progress that we made in recent years. It's almost 4 years ago now that we signed up to the principles of the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. We were one of the very first companies in our sector to do so. And our support in this regard remains firm. We will continue to refine our reporting to be in step with the Task Force principles. The relationship with industry associations is another area where we have provided greater transparency. 2 years ago, we became one of the first companies to conduct a review on the associations that we are part of to see if they are aligned with our own climate policies. And we have just issued the 3rd publication of this. And we will continue to take action where necessary, as we have done in the past. We also provide a statement on our corporate political engagement and our positions on key public issues on our website. So examples of advocacy include support for the EU's target to achieve climate neutrality by 2050, and in the United States for a return to the direct regulation of methane under the Clean Air Act. At the same time, we have also increased our transparency on taxation. You may remember in 2019, we published our first annual tax contribution report. And that report sets out the corporate income tax that Shell companies paid in countries and locations around the world. It gives information about our use of tax incentives, where we operate, why we operate there, and it builds on the information that we disclose in our annual report, our sustainability report, and the payments to governments reports. And most recently, on transparency, in January, at the World Economic Forum, we joined a global coalition of businesses that are committing to report on a range of ESG performance factors. The core stakeholder capitalism metrics, as they are called, are 21 disclosures, and they all map to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and cover a wide range of issues from diversity and inclusion to ethics, land use, greenhouse gases, etc. And in January, I promised that Shell would report on the core stakeholder capitalism metrics where we can. And today, I can tell you, I've made good on that promise. And you can find the disclosures on our website today. But this is only a first step. And we will be working to gather the data that we need to disclose more. And this is one of the very important initiatives in this area. We will continue to seek greater international convergence on ESG reporting standards, simply because it is needed so much. Now, of course, transparency and reporting are critical so that people can judge our performance. But ultimately, of course, it comes down to the performance itself. Our Powering Progress goals are there to drive that performance. Let's take the goal of respecting nature. as an example. So our ambitions include protecting and enhancing biodiversity, using water and other resources more efficiently, and reusing as much of them as we can. We are reducing waste from our operations, and we are increasing the recycling of plastics. And we have set out here a set of very specific goals. So we are aiming for zero waste by increasing reuse and recycle in our business and supply chains. And by 2030, we will increase the amount of recycled plastic in our packaging to 30%. And we will ensure that the packaging that we use for our products is reusable and recyclable. We will reduce the amount of fresh water that is consumed in our facilities, and that starts by reducing freshwater consumption by 15% by 2025 in those areas where there is high pressure on the resource. And importantly, we will also demonstrate an overall positive impact on biodiversity from our new projects in critical habitats. Now, of course, as you all know, in Nigeria, we have faced a consistent environmental challenge. And that's mainly because of leaks that are caused by sabotage and theft in areas where security is a really serious problem. So I said at Strategy Day that we would review the positions that continue to be challenging from an environmental perspective. And I said that a particular point of attention would be onshore oil in Nigeria. Now, over the last 10 years, we have reduced the total number of licenses in onshore Nigeria by half. But unfortunately, the remaining onshore oil operations continue to be subject to sabotage and theft, and that's despite our best efforts to limit and to respond to this illegal activity. So now we find that the balance of risk and reward that is associated with our onshore oil position is no longer compatible with our strategic ambitions. And because of this, we are now in discussions with the Nigerian government to align on a way to move forward. But Nigeria as a whole remains an important heartland for Shell. So our intent here is to focus our investment on the water and on the gas positions that we have there. Now, the issues associated with our onshore oil position in Nigeria are obviously significant, both for Shell and for the communities in Nigeria. And therefore we have a dedicated Nigeria session this afternoon, a bit later on, and we'll be happy to take any questions that you have on this matter then. But I can tell you, we remain determined to work with the people and the government of Nigeria, and we will do so in a way that is consistent with another goal of a Powering Progress strategy, which is powering lives. Shell helps to power lives, of course, by providing vital energy for homes, for businesses, and for transport, for cooking, heating, lighting. The supply of affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy is also crucial for addressing global challenges, including those related to poverty and to inequality. And our operations provide jobs and support economies across more than 70 countries. And through the investments we make, the goods we buy, and the taxes we pay, we make a major contribution. And as with our other Powering Progress goals, we have set ourselves a series of ambitions in this area as well. So we are, for example, working to improve diversity and inclusion across our workforce. Just one example, we intend to have women as 30% of our top 1,400 leaders at Shell by the end of this year. And that will be 35% by 2025 and 40% by 2030. And also by 2030, we will have made our global network of service stations more inclusive and more accessible to customers with physical disabilities. And as a final example, by 2030, we aim to provide reliable electricity to 100 million people in Africa and Asia who do not have it yet. Now, I should emphasize here that we will be doing it as a business investment, not as a charity. We will be investing in businesses that provide something that people want and need at a price they can afford, because that's the only way that you can achieve scale and through sustainability. And true sustainability at scale is really what Powering Progress is all about. Now, we're very much looking forward to exploring that with you further through the rest of our time together today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Nigel, and thank you, Ben. We will now move to a fireside chat with Ben to discuss our climate targets and the Shell energy transition strategy. You are all welcome to ask your questions in this session. You can do so by either calling the phone number you see on the screen or by typing your questions in the box on your screen. Please note that we ask you to indicate your name and company when you type your questions. We are sorry, but we will not take any questions which are posted anonymously. Now, let me introduce our moderator for this session. We are delighted to have Mindy Lubber joining us today. Mindy is a well-known global thought leader on sustainability. She's the CEO and president of the sustainability non-profit organization, Ceres. She leads an all-women executive leadership team working to mobilize investors and companies to tackle the world's biggest sustainability challenges. A recipient of numerous awards like the Champions of the Earth Award, the Climate Visionary Award, and William K. Riley Award of Environmental Leadership. Mindy also writes a regular column for Forbes.com on a variety of sustainability topics that have strengthened the business case for action. We're excited to have you with us today, Mindy. Thank you very much. After Mindy and Ben have set the scene, we will open for investor calls. Over to you, Mindy and Ben.
Terrific. I hope you can all hear me this morning, and good morning to all of you. Let's hope you are safe and well in this crazy world we're living in. Ben, it's good to be here with you.
Thank you, Mindy.
We're about to discuss in a very short period of time a subject that has some of the most compelling, important, far-reaching societal, economic implications, and the role of your company is crucial to that. So we're going to do the impossible. We're going to take on a world's challenge and see if we could reduce it to a half hour or so, but let's have at it. Just a couple of months ago, Ben, you announced Shell's new carbon targets to get to net zero by 2050 and to become Paris aligned in step with society. Today you published, and I had a sneak preview, I will admit, just a couple of days ago, you published your new energy transition strategy report, how you're going to get to net zero by 2050, since we all know that large proclamations about getting there are not good without a plan to do so. So I was pleased to read the transition strategy report. Taking on the energy transition in support of the Paris Agreement, both at the scale and the pace, is crucial, and it's not a simple challenge, but we know we have to get there. Let's talk a little bit about why you set those goals, what drove you to do so, how you see your responsibility in meeting those goals of the Paris Agreement, and really what you're going to do to get there, since really this is about details of making change. So let's dig in. How are you going to get there to that net zero imperative by 2050?
Yeah, I think, Mindy, I think it's very important to sort of start with, why did we do this? I think it comes down to two fundamental choices that we made actually already some years ago. So the first choice is, if we need to get to a different world, in which we, by the way, know that oil and gas will still have a role to play, what do we want to then be playing in that world? So you could have decided that, yeah, we're just going to be an oil and gas specialist. We're going to be really very good at doing the best possible oil and gas with low emissions and everything else, knowing that over time, that business will then be over. Or you can decide that, no, it's not about being the best in oil and gas. That's an entirely legitimate approach, by the way. You can also say we're going to change the mix of the products that we sell. And we obviously chose the latter. There's another choice that we made at that point in time, which is, are we going to change what we produce, or are we going to change what we sell? Now, a lot of people think, isn't that the same? You produce what you sell, isn't it? But that's actually not true. We almost produce four times less than we sell. So as I said in the opening remarks, it is better to see whether we can transform demand than to just offer different supply. And therefore, we set our targets in line with that philosophy to be net zero across scope 1, 2, and 3 on everything that we sell. And net zero by 2050. And why 2050? Because all advanced economies, and we are obviously part of an advanced economy ourselves as a company, need to get there by 2050. So the choices were pretty fundamental and principled as when we made them. And then, of course, you have to work out what are the interim targets, how you're going to get there, how much by 2021, 22, 23, 2030, 2035, etc. And for that, we actually used a methodology that is laid out in the report, which is essentially the IPCC methodology. So I think it's very important to understand first why we did it and what it actually is that we are doing.
Well, let's dig in. You talked about 2050, and it's essential that we get there and what your larger philosophy is. We all know that 2050 is a long way off, and if you're not on board and moving forward in 2025, 2030, as you talked about, we can't get there. So let's dig in just a bit on your 2030 ambition and your goals and your action. And is it enough? And these are not easy challenges, Ben. But hearing you describe how you believe Shell needs to shift demand for energy and reading the transition strategy, which is compelling and impressive, you seem to have broken it down into two phases. Now through 2030, which looks like a decade of transition, with relatively modest, not modest, but significant decreases in greenhouse gas intensity, some continued spending on exploration, and modest declines on oil production. And then post 2030, you anticipate your clean energy business achieves scale and the curve starts to bend much more steeply. First of all, let's talk about whether that's a fair characterization, but is it enough? And we all face this question every day. Are we doing enough? Is it enough? And do you see any danger that the company will move too slowly or maybe too quickly? I mean, what are the dangers facing you? And are your targets ambitious enough? Yeah. Should Shell be investing more in the short term, in the near term, to accelerate the availability of zero and low carbon solutions? You're a large company. This transition will not be easy. Just talk a bit more about the 2030 vision and how we get there.
Yeah, I think that they're incredibly important questions, Mindy, and we get them, of course, all the time. And they are indeed questions that are on people's mind, and rightly so. Let me address it as follows. So we say we want to get to net zero in step with society. And people often think that that's some sort of ruse or that we are hiding behind society or shifting the blame or whatever else. But the reality is, of course, that we are bound by what it is that our customers want. So let's take a look first about what is happening today and what we think will be happening in the next decade as far as society is concerned. So the real big decarbonization trends that are going on are, in my mind, threefold. So we see a lot of progress on decarbonizing power. So people switch from fossil to renewables. It's a big trend. But also intra-fossil, there is a trend. Coal to gas. And often, of course, the best thing is to go from coal to renewables. But decarbonization of power, undeniably, in my mind, is the biggest societal trend at the moment. Another one is decarbonization of personal mobility. So getting electric cars on the road, another significant trend. And a third one, I think, which is a significant trend that we know about, is the introduction of biofuels in the mix, biocomponents. I think there's, of course, many more other things going on, but in my mind, these are really the three biggest of the trends that we have. So if society is just doing that, then that's also our playing field. And what we are doing, if I take it in reverse, on biofuels, I think we've made a lot of progress. We are probably the largest biofuel blender in the world. We are one of the largest biofuel producer. Can we do more? Absolutely. Are we endeavoring to do more? Absolutely as well. So we are making progress right now in that space. If you look at the electrification of transport, particularly passenger cars, sure, we are making a lot of progress there as well. But let's not kid ourselves. On a global scale, that progress is still from an extremely small base. Of course, we can all look at how we see electric vehicles turn up in streets in London and Amsterdam and some other large cities in China and everything else. But of course, on a global scale, it is still tiny. Now, we are doing an awful lot by building out charging infrastructure and new business models and everything else. But it is relatively modest that you can do simply because there is still such a large fleet of internal combustion engine around. And finally, the area where there is probably most progress by society, the decarbonization of electricity, we are doing a lot as well. We are beginning to do a lot there by bidding and winning on wind farms and building solar farms and providing electricity to customers, etc., etc. But if you now step back from that and say, well, what's really going on here, both in society as well as with Shell, is we are basically diluting the base. We are adding low or no carbon energy to a base of carbon-based energy. And while that actually improves our carbon intensity, it is obviously not enough, because ultimately we have to substitute the base. Now, that may all sound very theoretical, but substituting the base in these areas that I'm talking about is we have to get rid of internal combustion engines, not just adding electric vehicles, no, scrapping internal combustion engine vehicles. We have to actually we have to get rid of kerosene in planes. And that's not happening at the moment. We have to actually have hydrogen trucks on the road that run on green or blue hydrogen. That at the moment is not happening. So only when these things will start to happen and we start to substitute the base from carbon-based to low carbon energy, that's when you see an acceleration. We think that acceleration is happening and is going to happen very much so in this decade, but it is probably not happening fast enough. So much of our strategy is to work with sectors and customers and interest groups and governments to actually make that decarbonization in these sectors work. And only then will we be able to sell hydrogen to the trucking fleet, or to sell biofuels to the aviation sector, or to really sell a lot of electricity at pace and at scale to cars and homes, etc., etc. So the acceleration that needs to happen this decade is an acceleration that is based on substituting instead of adding. And adding is what we have done so far.
Well, there is a lot of movement. Bill Ford said at our series conference 2 weeks ago that by 2035, he doesn't expect another consumer combustion engine vehicle coming off the assembly lines. And we certainly would like to see that even sooner. So there is progress being made around you. There's progress that will be made because of you. Let's talk just a little bit more about how you work with your customers and society, how you move. And you talked a bit about it in your opening. Literally, your policy positions is one way to move customers and society, and you're taking them. And where you weigh in on trade associations and political positions, you're looking at that. You said Shell needs to move in step with society, which of course it does. Your success in decarbonizing is linked to society's progress. You just laid out that circle around you. Let's dig in on some of the biggest hurdles you see in realizing this strategy. And perhaps more importantly, how will you take a proactive role in driving the change with your customers, with society more broadly, to make sure you're able to meet with your success, which of course builds to society's success? And let's start with an example. How much will you focus on choosing new customers versus changing the behavior of existing ones? Because that's a pretty big corporate decision. And you touched on it before, but let's dig in a bit more.
Yeah, of course, I think you're absolutely right. And you make it sound simple to understand. Of course, we have to move with society, but there's quite a few people who are not convinced that that's the case, that actually we can shape society. And well, maybe there is an element of truth in that. But then again, I think there's a higher likelihood that we can shape society by working on the demand side, where we have about 4.5% market share than on the supply side, where we have a, well, 1.4% market share. So yeah, working with society, working with our customers is absolutely important. Would it be good to just work with those customers, new customers that want to have a green solution? Yeah, of course. But unfortunately, they're not going to be enough. We have to also work with the existing customers, and we have to not just seduce them to use greener products, we have to make it a compelling proposition. And quite often it may also mean making it sort of mandatory from a government perspective to decarbonize or to adopt greener products, even though they may at first not look as commercially attractive as the incumbent fossil alternative. So that's why we have this focus on sectors, where we just say, you know, let's work on aviation. Now let's take that as an example. Mindy, it gets often used, so it maybe is overly familiar, but still, I think there's a lot of value in using it. So if we were to say, all right, the short-term solution and the mid-term solution for aviation is sustainable aviation fuels. So we will only deal with customers who want to buy sustainable aviation fuels. They are there, not an awful lot, by the way. And therefore, if that is the only thing we could do, that would still be a very immaterial business. It would be a fraction of the business we currently have. And we are the largest provider of aviation fuels in the world, with a market share of about 7% or so. So it's much better to work in that sector and say, why don't we sit together with airlines and airports and aircraft manufacturers and turbine manufacturers, with regulators, with the IATA, and figure out the pathway that is going to be needed, and figure out the regulations that are going to be needed to make that pathway a reality. And then, of course, as demand takes off, and that may well be, for instance, by mandating a minimum amount of biofuels in the jet fuel mix globally and ratcheting that up every year, as then demand takes off, of course, we will supply. We are ready to invest and supply. But we cannot just show up with our sustainable aviation fuel and say, who likes it? It's 3 times as expensive as the fossil variation, but you know, if you want to be green, you can have it. And so that's a challenge that we currently face at the moment, sector by sector. Rather than hang back and wait for sectors or governments or customers to move, I think we have to be in the problem and help it move forward. And that is the heart of our strategy. The heart of our strategy is to reform demand and then be the supplier of that reform demand. That, I think, is the single most important thing that a company with our capabilities and reach and competencies can do. Now, what is the challenge? Now, the challenge, of course, is obviously to get sectors to move, and different sectors will have to move in different ways. And if that doesn't happen, we are in trouble, I will admit that, but then the whole world is in trouble for that matter. But the second biggest challenge, and maybe even bigger challenge that underlies this in my mind, Mindy, is that the whole debate around this, the whole debate around climate change, is just not very coherent. It is very poor. And as a matter of fact, that then sits in the way of the orchestration that is needed if you want to do a sector by sector decarbonization. A lot of people have opinions. They're all shouted from the rooftops every time. There is no alignment on what the solutions are. There's not even an alignment on what the problems are. There are lots of simplistic ideas around. There is demonization, scapegoating, as we sometimes unfortunately also have to admit. And therefore, I think there is insufficient coherence in policies. And that, I think, is changing. I hope it's changing. There were today actually quite a few interesting articles suggesting that the debate is becoming more nuanced. But if that doesn't happen, if it simply stays at the levels where it has been the last few years, then I think we will make the same progress as a world that we have made for the last few years, which is not enough.
I'm going to put a yellow highlight. It is not enough. And clearly, we need changes from the largest corporate players, and we do need policy. We need policies that align, so everybody is playing by the same set of rules. There's a level playing field, and that has to be a part of what we're all doing, and we're glad you're stepping up on those issues. Let's come back to the company, although I would love to talk about policy for the next 2 hours. I don't think we have time. you've got to generate support even within your own company. Shell is not 15 people who you could bring into the room. It's a massive global empire. You've said you can't do this alone. We know that there'll be many critics looking at you and saying not enough, too much. And at the same time, you've got to move your company so it is on clear footing. And so investors and employees support this change. There's a lot to navigate to make that happen, both in the short term and the long term. I'm intrigued by the fact that you're the first energy company to publish an energy transition strategy report that's being put to your shareholders.
Yeah.
Put to the shareholders for an advisory vote. So it is not just you sitting with your executives. And I think that's I think that's a smart step forward to create more accountability. You're putting yourself out there. You're saying, here are our goals. Watch us, follow us, make sure we're accountable. You're committing to transparency, crucial for accountability. Why did you do this? You could do lots of things. And I, for one, think it's crucial to have shareholders be able to hold you accountable. It supports you, but it's a pretty bold move. And there'll be days when it causes you pain and suffering, hopefully good and productive and constructive pain. But you're certainly opening up yourself to produce details that really will make a difference.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right with what you say there, Mindy. I'm not sure there will be many days that I regret it, because I only have to think back to the alternative. But what I hope to achieve is sort of picking up a little bit where I left it with your last question. Well, I hope we will just get a more nuanced debate as a result of it. Because again, you know, so far the debate in society when it came to our company and the things that we do was relatively unnuanced. So take Paris alignment. But what does it mean, Paris alignment? Are we Paris aligned? Well, of course, a lot of people say, you're not Paris aligned. And we say, yes, we are. Well, that's a pretty unnuanced discussion. It's much better to just say, there is no standard for Paris alignment, yeah, but this is what we think, this is what we are doing, this is how we set our targets. And again, read the report and you will see that we explain how we come to the targets on what we believe is Paris alignment. We may well be wrong, there may be other views in the world, but then let's have a discussion about it. And now we can have a discussion about it. How are we going to make impact? A lot of people say, you make impact by just not extracting anymore. And I said, well, okay, fine then, but what if I sell somebody else's products? Isn't it better that we actually reform demand rather than reform supply? Quite often, if we get into that discussion, I draw blanks. People don't know what I mean. They think it's the same, supply and demand. So now we explain it, and hopefully we get a more nuanced discussion. Again, we produce only a quarter of what we sell. So isn't selling more important than producing? So let's again have a bit more of a nuanced discussion on how we go about it. Progress. A lot of people say, well, the only way we can measure progress is just where you spend your money. Well, no, because how you spend money on renewables and on customer-facing solutions works in a different way than resource extraction. So why don't we look at what we're actually doing in terms of carbon rather than CapEx? Now, that's also a very difficult solution, because a lot of people say, well, as long as you spend money on oil and gas, you can't be Paris compliant. Where is that idea coming from? So again, let's have a more nuanced discussion. I think, Mindy, the only way we can have that nuanced discussion is not to shout harder and to be more creative with the arguments or whatever else, but actually is to put our thinking down in a 30-page plus document and to ask people to read it, to digest it, to be in dialogue with us. Yeah, vote on it. So we get a sense of whether this is resonating or not. And then indeed, every year, hold us to account as we report progress against it. Because only then do we get to a more nuanced, a more grown-up discussion. And only then, in my mind, do we as an industry, and dare I say as a world, have a chance to solving the problem, rather than just talking about it at 20,000 feet levels. So that's why we did it. Now, is it helpful for our staff? Yeah, I suppose it is. Quite often, of course, our staff also want to understand what we are doing, how we're going about it, what it means. Quite often, of course, our staff also read newspapers and listen to protests, and they want to know, what our thinking is, how we respond to that. They want to know how they can contribute. They want to be reassured that they work for a company that knows what it's doing. But does our staff need convincing that we need to be ready for the future? And no, we have surprisingly few people that tell me it's all nonsense. Why don't you just stick with our knitting? That's a whole lot better. But a lot of people think that we have to somehow drag our people into it. You will be surprised how many people, including in our upstream business, really want our company to succeed in the energy transition. And I want to be part of it as well.
That's great. Look, you can't go forth with a plan without bringing your employees along, or without clarity of vision of what is the plan, what's the plan for 2030, 2040, 2050. So it's great to have that. As you know, investors have played a major role in this discussion. There are 550 investors acting together through Climate Action 100+, calling on companies to change. And I know you've been in discussions with your investors, and we're seeing lots of progress. Obviously, we're on the phone, we're on a session today with your investors, and we'll open this up in a minute to questions. How have you seen the response from your investors? And obviously, bringing this to a vote is the way for you to find out. How do they vote? What do they think? They're an important constituent. What are they telling you so far?
Well, on the report, obviously, we haven't had a lot of input from our investors because it only came out this morning. Although some of our critics have already denounced the report before they saw it. But then again, I'm not entirely sure that we should pay too much attention to that. I think in general, it's not the first time we talk about our approach and what we are doing. It's the first time we really documented with what I hope will be good clarity and good context and good underpinning. But when we talk to our investors, what we are doing, why we are doing it, I think we have been on a journey of increased clarity as well. I think increasingly our investors are seeing that there is actually no long-term success really for a company like us, to just stick to your knitting. If you want to be a global player with a brand that we have, with the capabilities that we have, you just have to be in line with society. You actually have to drive where you can the positive outcomes that society wants. So I think there is now increasingly an acceptance that this is a good thing to do. And if not, many of our investors or their clients will tell them that this is what they expect our investors to go for. Some investors, of course, still have to get used to the idea what it all means, because many investors actually like to think of us as a collection of oil and gas fields. And now the narrative has become a bit more complex, because a lot of the future value of the energy transition is not going to be just locked up in assets. It's actually going to be locked up in business models and products. So all of a sudden, the product is more important than the production. And that's a new concept. It's also a new concept in terms of how you value a company. And I think there we have more work to do. We have more work to do to explain to investors how to value us. And where we also have more work to do is to prove that actually investing in this future of energy is a good proposition. Many people still look at the future of energy as, again, okay, not anymore oil fields and gas fields, but now it's wind farms and solar parks. Well, that's a low return business, isn't it? So why would you want to do that? And again, we have to explain, no. Now, the wind parks and the solar farms may be important control points, but the value in this transition is going to be in the way you offer solutions to customers. It's not anymore having the best assets. It is having the best products and the best solutions. Again, I think that is a journey that we have to go on together with our investors to explain how that works, and to explain that if this world is going to do one of the hardest things it will ever have done in society, there better be value in it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. The trillions of dollars that are going to be needed are not going to be coming forward. And if you believe that this transition can be done by a bunch of startups, then think again. It's only going to happen if sophisticated global companies with capabilities and reaches and a base customer base like us are in the fray and are successful. And I think in all these areas, we still have work to do, Mindy. But again, I hope that putting it down in a report, having people the opportunity, getting people the opportunity to actually think about it, vote on it, talk to us about it, engage year after year, will improve that understanding, not just for our investors, but obviously also for ourselves.
I've been hearing from many of the investors that we work with the issue of offsets. No matter what we do to get to that net zero future, there will be some conversation and some need to have offsets. You've said clearly that offsets are the last tool to decarbonize Shell's footprint, not the first, and I would applaud that. But there's certainly still offsets that will be had where needed and so on. How do you balance the negative emissions with the need to keep the ambition level of reductions high? What do you say to critics, and I know you're looking at this and working at it, who argue that natural climate solutions should be reserved only for the very hardest to abate sectors like cement, like steel? Thinking about offsets is crucial. I will tell you that we are hearing across the economy many players saying, oh, well, we'll just buy offsets and we'll be fine. We'll keep emissions going up and we'll offset some of them. Obviously, this is a world where we've got to solve the problem in ways that are really about change. How are you looking at offsets?
It's a very important point to get right, Mindy, both in terms of, you know, what we really do about it, but also how we communicate the intent clearly. And I think we've tried to be clear in the sense that we say, well, offsets are a last resort. If you think about it, and sorry for getting a bit sort of philosophical first, in the end, what we need to do when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions is, first of all, we need to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that we create as much as possible, reducing the fossil fuels that come out of the ground. But at the end, whatever carbon keeps on coming out of the ground, and don't believe for a moment that we can have an economy without any carbon coming out of the ground, but whatever carbon comes out of the ground needs to be somehow sequestered. It either is going to be sequestered because it is turned into a material, into a cell phone, into a PC, into a car or whatever else, or it's going to be sequestered because we capture it and stick it back into a geological formation, or it's going to be sequestered because we put it back into nature in the form of a tree, simply put. But of course, we can only do that sequestering, whether it is in materials or in CCS or in nature. We can only do that if we are talking about a whole lot smaller amount of carbon that we extract. So that's why we say there is room for this. As a matter of fact, we can't get to zero if it isn't net zero, and therefore we have to have these solutions of mitigation, but we can only do it after we've done everything else. We can't just start with it or do only mitigation and offsets. So that's point number one. And I think nobody who is sort of scientifically knowledgeable in that space and will say, oh yeah, sure, we can get there without offsets. So that's point number one. The amount of offsets that we think we are going to have in the mix at the end of the day is roughly in the middle range of what the IPCC says the world is going to need. So it's not as if we have conveniently used offsets in excessive quantums, because that will mean that we can continue extracting oil and gas. No, far from it. We have taken what the IPCC believes is an acceptable and a necessary range of offsets that the world is going to need. Same, by the way, true for carbon capture and utilization and storage. Now then, how do you use it? So the philosophy that I have is, indeed, you use it for the emissions that are hard to abate. Now, could it be cement and steel? I would say no. For cement and steel, they have technological solutions that may be difficult, may be expensive, but they are nevertheless ultimately economically and technologically doable. It's CCS or new processes. Hydrogen for steel making, we can do it. It may raise the cost of steel and we need to make green hydrogen or blue hydrogen for it, but it can be done. I think what is much harder to abate is where you have diffuse emissions. So not a plant or a facility, but a car or a plane. You can't do CCS on a plane or on a car. And we will have a lot of cars and planes still going on fossil fuels also by 2050. We cannot simply scrap everything. We may be having 0 new cars with internal combustion engines by that time, but we will still be using and selling second-hand cars. What do you think of Africa, where the average new car is 11 years old? Yeah. So you will inevitably, for customer emissions that are highly diffuse, you will need to make use of these offsets. Now, there better be good offsets. And at the moment, we do not have a standard for nature-based solutions, only voluntary standards. And we are advocating for only the highest quality, independently verified nature-based solutions. And we ourselves have set ourselves a target to do this. We actually have set ourselves a target to originate some of these compensating offsets ourselves, so be in forestry activities, etc. But ultimately, the world will have to, make this a much more profound piece of the solution set with standards and businesses and markets and everything else. So yeah, I think there is a need for it, and nobody who knows this material well will disagree with me, I think, but you will only use it for those areas where there is really no alternative.
That's what I want to hear. And we do need to get to standards, and we will be part of that, as many, of defining what those standards are. So as you say, it's nuanced. We're not debating what's good and what's not. There'll be standards. And I would argue that needs to happen sooner rather than later, and we'll be part of that discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for being with us today. And as Ben outlined, Powering Progress sets out our strategy to accelerate the transition of our business to net zero emissions, and to do that purposefully and profitably. He talks about our 4 goals, which are all critical to Shell's future and our future in society. In this session, I will focus on 2 of these: powering lives and respecting nature. We want to power lives and livelihoods through our products, our activities, and by supporting an inclusive society. This is about contributing, it's about providing jobs, equal opportunities, paying taxes, and even providing access to reliable electricity for those who do not have it yet. Let me give you a little more insight on one of those areas: diversity and inclusion. Indeed, we want to become one of the most diverse and inclusive companies in the world. We want to be a place where everyone feels valued and respected, where all employees are able to be themselves, to thrive and fulfill their full potential. We are building a culture of inclusion because it's the right thing to do. And we know that a culture where people feel valued is one that also delivers great value, great business value, that is. We've outlined ambitions and commitments on racial and ethnic representation, on women at the senior leadership level, and on the LGBT+ community and people with disabilities. We are increasingly hiring and promoting more women. We are doing this by creating a culture of respect and inclusion and matching this with targeted action. For instance, we've introduced a global policy on maternity leave that offers a minimum of 16 weeks, as well as flexible working arrangements for our employees. We are also working across the energy sector on this, and Ben is a member of the Catalyst CEO Champions for Change. This is a group of more than 50 CEOs who pledge to support women's advancements at all levels of leadership. We set targets to achieve 30% representation of women in senior leadership positions at Shell by the end of 2021, and 35% by 2025, and then 40% by 2030. It's very gratifying to announce that we are at or over the 30% already. We've made progress, but we cannot stop until we've achieved equal representation in senior leadership and across our organization. This is how we aim to create a balance in our workforce. And it's just one way we aim to power lives. We want to keep the balance in nature too. And this relates to the second goal I will talk about: respecting nature. For many years, we've had guiding principles and standards that seek to protect the environment. However, there's growing urgency, particularly around protecting biodiversity, preserving water, and using resources more efficiently. Our new framework aims to focus our efforts, stepping up our environmental ambitions and shaping them to contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and increasing the transparency of our actions. It focuses on 4 areas: circular economy and waste, air quality, biodiversity, and water. It builds on existing internal requirements and work that is already underway in many of our operations. The framework for respecting nature sets out our shorter-term goals as well as ambitions for 2030 and beyond. Let me give you a little more detail and some examples on water and biodiversity. First, water. And we know that ensuring water is essential for everyone globally. And yet at the same time, it is a huge challenge. As an energy company, we need water for our operations. So using water as efficiently as possible has always been part of our standards for many years. However, we are now the first international oil and gas company to set a freshwater reduction target. We are focusing on areas where there is high pressure on resources, and we aim to reduce freshwater consumption in our facilities by 15% by 2025, compared with the baseline of 2018. Work has already started on this, and we aim to do much more. For example, in our Pearl gas to liquids project in Qatar, where freshwater has been identified as a critical strategic issue for the country, we treat water produced in the gas to liquids process and reuse it in the plant. Our various efforts so far have resulted in almost complete recycling and reuse of water at the facility. In other places, we work with communities to find better ways to share water as a resource. In Canada, for example, Shell has worked with the people of Dawson Creek to manage water use at our nearby natural gas operations at Groundbirch. We have partnered with the City Council to open a plant that treats municipal wastewater that would otherwise be discharged in a local river. Groundbirch now recycles approximately 98% of its water, and the city of Dawson Creek can use the treated water for its own needs, such as cleaning roads and irrigating parks. Projects like these are, of course, a good start, but we do know there's much more to do. And we will assess options for further freshwater reduction goals by the end of 2022. Preserving water is key in protecting nature, and so too is preserving biodiversity. This is the second aspect I'd like to look at. What we do as an energy company can affect local habitats and the communities that depend on them. So here too, we are building on existing work. Indeed, we committed not to explore for and develop oil and gas resources in natural and mixed World Heritage sites as far back as 2003. And now we will go much further. Our ambition is to have a positive impact on biodiversity. We do always seek to avoid impacts on nature where we can. And where we cannot avoid it, we aim to minimize our impact. And where our operations are affected by biodiversity, we do take steps to restore disturbed habitats. And to achieve an overall positive impact, we will now take further action to improve biodiversity. We now want our new projects to have a net positive impact on biodiversity. These will be our new projects in areas of critical habitats and our nature-based solution projects, which protect, transform, or restore land. We aim for these nature-based solutions projects to have further environmental benefits beyond storing carbon, such as improving soil productivity, cleaning air and water, maintaining biodiversity, while also offering alternative sources of income to local communities. We will also replant forests. In other words, we will aim to achieve net zero deforestation from new activities. One example in that regard is the Shell-operated natural gas plant in Queensland, Australia. In developing the project, the team could not avoid clearing some areas of vegetation. Now, to offset these impacts, the team developed a biodiversity action plan, which has included acquiring a neglected former cattle farm. The property contains large areas of eucalyptus woodlands, rivers and wetlands, which are now protected and being enhanced through activities such as weed control, fire management, and native forest regeneration. So work has begun, and we will soon be implementing our biodiversity commitments. From encouraging diversity and inclusion to conserving fresh water and protecting the environment, these are just a few examples of how we're already powering lives and respecting nature today, and how we aim to do much more in the future. As is the custom, we will report on our progress in achieving our goals in our annual sustainability report. This is, however, just the beginning of a long journey, we realize, and we do not always get it right. And we will continue to learn and improve as we move forward. This includes working with our environmental partners, like the International Union for Conservation of Nature. I'm looking very much to exploring these challenges with you during the questions and answer sessions. And I very much know that Karen and Lynn are looking forward to that too. Tjerk will again help us facilitate the session. Over to you, Tjerk, and thank you very much.
Let me firstly maybe begin with discussing our onshore oil position in Nigeria. Nigeria remains a heartland for us in Shell. We've been in the country for more than 60 years, and it continues to offer attractive investment opportunities. And indeed, over the past 5 years, we have increased our oil and gas production in the country. Nevertheless, our intention now is to focus our Nigeria investment on our deep water and our gas positions. As Ben said earlier, this is because the balance of risk and reward that's associated with our onshore oil portfolio in Nigeria is no longer compatible with our strategic ambitions as a company. This is why we have started the discussions now with the Nigerian government to align on a way to move forward. Now, obviously, the amount of detail that I can give you at this stage is relatively limited, but it's worth noting again that we have already reduced the total number of licenses in the onshore Nigerian presence by 50% over the past decade. I should also mention that we are restricted on what we can say on another matter, which is the recent judgment in the Italian courts over OPL 245. As we've maintained throughout, the 2011 settlement with the federal government of Nigeria and ENI, which was at the center of this trial, was a legal transaction. And while we welcome the ruling, the fact remains that this has been a difficult learning experience for us as a company. Business integrity is one of our core values, and we continue to invest and work hard to raise our standards in this area. We have, for example, quadrupled our anti-bribery and corruption team and introduced a mandatory ethical leadership program for all of our senior managers. In 2020, for example, we've developed, with the help of an external panel, a new decision-making framework to ensure that we continue to make ethical decisions in line with our code of conduct. The framework, which we are launching in 2021, will help our staff to think through in a structured way the legal, ethical, and external consequences of the various decisions that they face in their daily work. Something that we can give you a full update on is our environmental and our social performance in Nigeria. And here I'll hand over to Osagie, who, as Tjerk introduced, is our country chair for Nigeria and the managing director of SPDC, and who can provide you more details. Osagie, over to you.
Thank you, Wael. Nigeria remains a challenging environment where we strive every day to deliver the best performance for the SPDC joint venture, for Nigeria and for the communities in which we operate. I will touch on 3 areas, and we made progress on all of them in 2020. Firstly, I will detail our performance on spills, cleanup, and actions to counter the continuing threat of sabotage and theft in our operations. Secondly, I will update you on flaring. And finally, I will mention our social investment programs, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 epidemic in Nigeria. Firstly, on spills. We are working hard to make continued progress on both preventing and cleaning up of oil spills. We have a firm belief that no spill is acceptable. The SPDC JV does everything it can to prevent them, and today the total spilled volume of crude oil is at its lowest level for at least 10 years. To be clear, that includes both operational spills and spills caused by illegal activities. Illegal activity unfortunately causes the overwhelming majority of spills in terms of both numbers and volume. In fact, 99% of the volume spilled in 2020 were caused by illegal activities. This, unfortunately, is a situation we face in common with other operators in the Niger Delta. Whatever the cause of a spill, the SPDC joint venture acts quickly to shut it down and to clean up. Better collaboration with government security agencies and close engagement with our communities has enabled quicker action. On average, joint investigations into the cause of a spill started within 2 days in 2020, compared to 6 days in 2016. In 2019, the SPDC joint venture successfully completed the cleanup of 130 sites, a record year. We have planned to extend that pace into 2020. Unfortunately, working restrictions to prevent the spread of COVID-19 reduced remediation to 50 sites last year. In 2021, with the benefit of what we have learned in 2020, SPDC plans to deal with more than 150 sites. As you are aware, important ongoing cleanup efforts are taking place in Bodo and Ogoniland. Work to complete the Bodo cleanup has progressed this year, but it has also been impacted by COVID-19. SPDC's determination is, of course, unchanged, and Bodo Phase 2 is now expected to be completed in 2023. Work also continues to clean up Ogoniland in line with the 2011 UN Environmental Programme, or UNEP report. SPDC has taken action on all of the UNEP recommendations addressed specifically to us as operator of the SPDC JV. The SPDC joint venture's financial contribution to the Ogoni Trust Fund stands today at $360 million, and it will rise to $900 million. The cleanup efforts themselves are led by an agency established by the Nigerian federal government, the Hydrocarbon Pollution and Remediation Process, HYPREP. These efforts too have been delayed, unfortunately, by COVID-19. We continue to support HYPREP in their work on this complex project. We're happy to take questions from you on any of these issues related to oil spills shortly, but I would first very quickly mention our progress on flaring and on social investment in the context of COVID-19. I am glad to say that SPDC JV has decreased routine flaring by almost 90% since 2002, and by 17% in 2020 compared to 2019. Gas that used to be flared is now generated and either sold to Nigerian customers or exported. Shell companies in Nigeria continue to make investments alongside partners to build on this progress. A recent example is the Southern Swamp Associated Gas Solutions Project, which was commissioned in 2020. And another is the Forcados Yokri Gas Gathering Project. We are very proud of that progress, and we're also proud of the performance in the context of COVID-19. We acted to protect staff, and we acted to support our Nigerian authorities and the communities we work with as well. Operations were shut down for several weeks to protect staff and contractors from COVID-19 until safety could be ensured. Shell also contributed significant resources and expertise to help federal and state governments and communities fight the spread of the COVID-19. Company representatives worked with the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, to boost testing capacity across 9 states. We also provided free feeding programs in isolation centers for infected individuals in 7 states and contributed medical equipment to state healthcare facilities. All this action was consistent with our long-standing approach to partner with the country, the government, and above all, the communities within which we operate. Shell companies and our joint venture partners in Nigeria have made social investments at an average of $50 million each year for the last 5 years. This money helps improve the lives of millions of Nigerians. It has improved healthcare and education, as well as supported young Nigerian entrepreneurs. Shell companies also continue to invest in Nigerians themselves, with 97% of our employees here being Nigerian. And in 2020, these Shell companies paid taxes and royalties to the tune of $900 million to the government, and awarded contracts worth more than $800 million to Nigerian registered businesses. I could continue, but we should get on with your questions. So I would just say that despite the challenges we face, we are very proud of the work we do in Nigeria and with the Nigerian people. With Nigeria as a heartland of Shell, this work will continue. And it is very much an example of powering progress in action. We are very much powering lives here in Nigeria. Thank you. So let me hand back now to Jack.